Commander Zefter of the Hegemony Third Fleet studied the holographic display with growing frustration. The blue and green marble suspended before him looked deceptively peaceful, but 3 standard cycles of orbital bombardment had failed to break the human resistance. The planet called Earth continued to defy the galaxy's most advanced military force. "Status report on the southern continent operations," Zefter commanded. His forearms gesturing impatiently at the tactical display. "Subcommander." Krillex consulted his datapad with practiced efficiency. "Sir, our ground forces have successfully occupied all major urban centers. Human military installations have been neutralized according to plan. However, we continue to experience complications in the forested regions." Zefter's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Complications? We possess energy shields, plasma weaponry, and atmospheric superiority. What complications could these primitives possibly present?" The display zoomed to show vast green expanses that covered much of the planet's landmass. Dense canopies stretched endlessly, broken only by winding rivers that reflected the alien sun like scattered mirrors. To the hegemony forces, these wilderness areas represented nothing more than empty space between valuable targets. "Our reconnaissance indicates minimal infrastructure in these regions," Krillex continued. "No cities, no factories, no strategic value. Some scattered settlements, but nothing that would impact our occupation timeline." Admiral Gorthon, the fleet's senior tactical advisor, leaned forward from his observation post. His species had conquered 47 worlds, each victory achieved through overwhelming technological superiority. "Perhaps we should simply ignore these wilderness areas. Once we control the population centers and industrial capacity, any remaining humans will have no choice but to surrender." Zefter considered this approach. The hegemony's standard conquest protocol had proven effective across the galaxy. Advanced civilizations fell quickly once their cities and infrastructure were captured. The scattered remnants hiding in uninhabitable regions inevitably surrendered within a few cycles. Unable to survive without their technological support systems? Agreed, Zefter decided. Deploy barrier satellites around the major wilderness areas. Contain any remaining humans while we consolidate our control. They lack the technology to threaten our operations from such primitive environments. What the hegemony commanders failed to understand was that Earth's wilderness areas were far from empty. Deep within the Amazon basin, Colonel Sarah Chun received the latest intelligence reports through encrypted quantum channels that the aliens hadn't yet learned to detect. The hegemony's dismissal of Earth's forests would prove to be their first critical mistake. Chun commanded the 75th Jungle Warfare Regiment, an elite unit that few people outside the military even knew existed. For 2 decades, her soldiers had trained in the world's most challenging environments, learning to thrive where others merely survived. They understood something the aliens couldn't comprehend. In the jungle, technology was often a liability rather than an advantage. Ma'am. Orbital surveillance shows 3 hegemony divisions establishing perimeter bases around our operational area, reported Master Sergeant Rodriguez, Chun's senior non-commissioned officer. They're treating the forest like a quarantine zone. Chun smiled grimly as she studied the tactical data. The aliens had positioned their forces exactly where human intelligence had predicted they would. They're thinking like conventional military planners. Control the cities, control the population, control the planet. They don't understand that we're not hiding in the jungle, we're home here. The regiment had spent months preparing for this moment. Supply caches were buried throughout the forest, connected by trails that existed only in the memories of soldiers who had walked these paths for years. Communication networks relied on methods the hegemony wouldn't expect. Low-frequency signals that traveled through root systems, messages carried by trained birds, and hand signals passed between scouts who could move through the canopy without disturbing a single leaf. Lieutenant Williams emerged from the communications bunker, her uniform already showing the green stains that marked a true jungle soldier. "Colonel, we've got confirmation from all companies. The aliens are establishing supply convoys along the major rivers, exactly as anticipated." Chun nodded. The hegemony's dependence on their technology was becoming clear. Their vehicles required specific fuel types, their weapons needed regular maintenance, and their soldiers couldn't survive without environmental suits that regulated temperature and filtered the air. Everything they needed had to be transported through the very environment where humans held every advantage. "What's the status on the Indigenous Cooperation Program?" Chun asked. Sergeant First Class Nakamura, who had spent 5 years working with local tribes before the invasion, stepped forward. "Full participation, ma'am. The Yanomami, Kayapo, and 15 other groups have joined the resistance network. They've been sharing traditional knowledge that's already paying dividends." This collaboration represented another factor the hegemony had completely overlooked. They saw Earth's indigenous populations as remnants of a primitive past, but Qin understood they were the planet's greatest experts in survival warfare. Generations of accumulated knowledge about forest navigation, camouflage techniques, and sustainable living had been freely shared with the military units. The aliens' first direct encounter with this reality came 3 days later. A hegemony patrol vessel, following what their sensors identified as a river suitable for supply transport, detected what appeared to be a small human settlement. The tactical data indicated fewer than 50 life forms, no energy signatures suggesting advanced weapons, and no defensive structures. Captain Exmoor commanded the patrol vessel with the confidence of someone who had never faced serious opposition. His ship carried 40 elite hegemony Marines equipped with the latest combat technology. The humans below possessed nothing more sophisticated than primitive chemical projectile weapons, according to intelligence reports. "Deploy landing force," Exmoor ordered. "Standard pacification protocol. Minimal resistance expected." The Marines descended through the forest canopy in armored dropships, their sensors scanning for threats that simply weren't there. No energy weapons, no shield generators, no mechanized units. The settlement appeared to be exactly what it seemed: a handful of wooden structures inhabited by primitives who had somehow avoided the initial planetary bombardment. What the aliens didn't realize was that they weren't looking at a settlement at all. They were seeing a carefully constructed killing ground that had been months in preparation. Every building was positioned to create specific firing lanes. Every path had been designed to channel movement in predetermined directions, and every tree had been evaluated for its potential use in the coming engagement. The hegemony Marines advanced confidently through what they believed was harmless wilderness. Their environmental suits hummed softly as they filtered the humid air, their plasma rifles charged and ready for any primitive resistance they might encounter. They moved in standard formation, following protocols developed for urban warfare against technologically comparable opponents. The first sign that something was wrong came when their communications suddenly stopped working. The energy dampening field that surrounded them wasn't technological, it was biological. Certain plants in the Amazon produced electromagnetic effects that interfered with alien equipment, a fact that local shamans had known for generations and shared with the military researchers. "Command. This is Marine Team Alpha," the patrol leader spoke into his communications device. "We're experiencing technical difficulties with our equipment." Only silence answered him. The jungle around them seemed to have grown somehow larger and more threatening, though none of the Marines could identify exactly what had changed. Their training had prepared them for combat against enemy soldiers, not for the psychological pressure of being watched by an environment that felt actively hostile. The attack, when it came, was unlike anything in hegemony military experience. There were no muzzle flashes to target, no energy signatures to track, no formations to engage. Instead, Marines simply began disappearing. One moment a soldier was there, the next he was gone, leaving only a faint disturbance in the undergrowth that could have been anything. The humans struck with the patience of natural predators and the precision of elite soldiers. Each engagement was carefully planned to maximize psychological impact while minimizing risk to the human forces. They used the jungle itself as a weapon, turning the aliens' technological advantages into critical vulnerabilities. Colonel Chun monitored the engagement from a command post that the hegemony sensors would never detect. built into the root system of a massive cecropia tree. The position provided complete oversight of the tactical situation while remaining virtually invisible to any form of technological reconnaissance. Phase 1 is proceeding as planned, she reported to higher command. The aliens are learning their first lesson about fighting on our world. The lesson was simple but fundamental. In the jungle, the environment itself was the ultimate weapon. Technology that worked perfectly in the sterile conditions of a spacecraft became unreliable in the humid, electromagnetic chaos of the raw. The emergency council aboard the Hegemony flagship convened with an urgency that surprised even veteran commanders. In 40 years of conquest campaigns, Admiral Gorthon had never been forced to call such a meeting after losing contact with a full Marine platoon during what should have been a routine pacification mission. Explain to me how 40 Marines with full combat gear simply vanish, Gorthon demanded, his voice carrying the dangerous calm that his subordinates had learned to fear. Commander Zefter gestured helplessly at the tactical display. Our last telemetry showed normal patrol patterns. Standard formation, all equipment functional. No enemy contact reported. Then ... nothing. Complete communication blackout across a 12-kilometer radius. Sub-Commander Krillex, who had initially dismissed the forest regions as irrelevant, now found himself struggling to explain the inexplicable. Sir, our atmospheric reconnaissance shows no large-scale human military formations in the area. No vehicles, no aircraft, no energy weapons signatures. According to all conventional analysis, that region should be uninhabited. The reality was far different. Master Sergeant Rodriguez crouched motionless, beneath a fallen log that had been carefully positioned to provide perfect concealment while maintaining clear fields of fire. Around him, 12 soldiers from Alpha Company waited with the infinite patience that marked elite jungle fighters. They had been in position for 16 hours, but their training made such waits feel routine rather than endurance test. The Hegemony search party approaching their position represented the aliens' first serious attempt to understand what had happened to their missing Marines. This force was larger, better equipped, and clearly more cautious than the previous patrol. Energy shields flickered around each soldier, and they moved in overlapping formations designed to provide mutual support. Rodriguez touched his throat microphone, activating the low-frequency communication system that the aliens had proven unable to detect. Overwatch, this is Ground Team Alpha, enemy force approaching designated engagement zone. Count 24 hostiles with full combat loadout. Colonel Chen's voice crackled back through the organic fiber earpiece. Confirmed, Alpha. Remember, we want prisoners for intelligence gathering. Disable, don't destroy. This presented a challenge that showcased the sophistication of human jungle warfare tactics. The aliens' environmental suits were their critical vulnerability. Puncture the suits without killing the occupants, and the hostile environment would do the rest. It required precision shooting that would have been impossible for conventional forces, but represented routine marksmanship for soldiers who had trained to hit targets the size of coins from distances measured in hundreds of meters. The engagement began with the characteristic silence that marked human jungle operations. The first Hegemony soldier simply collapsed, his environmental suit venting atmosphere through a pinprick hole that his targeting computer had never detected. His companions spun in confusion, searching for an enemy that wasn't there. Contact! We're taking fire. The patrol leader shouted into his communications device, unable to identify hostile positions. The response came from orbit, where Captain Nexmore had been monitoring the search operation with growing anxiety. Deploy countermeasures. Full spectrum scan for human weapons signatures. The scanning arrays aboard the Hegemony vessels were sophisticated, enough to detect energy emissions from primitive human technology at ranges exceeding 50 kilometers. They could identify the electromagnetic signature of a chemical projectile weapon from the moment it was fired. What they couldn't detect was a weapon that produced no electromagnetic signature at all. Sergeant Williams adjusted her position behind a massive buttress root, settling the custom crossbow that had taken traditional Amazon hunting implements and enhanced them with modern materials science. The weapon was completely silent, produced no energy emissions, and could punch through hegemony armor at ranges that would surprise most military analysts. Her target was a hegemony officer whose suit displayed command markings. The shot needed to be perfect, disabling without killing, precise enough to puncture the environmental system while avoiding vital organs. Williams had made similar shots hundreds of times during training, but never with the stakes this high. The crossbow bolt, crafted from materials that wouldn't register on alien sensors, flew through the humid air with ballistic precision. It struck exactly where intended, punching through the environmental suit's filtration system and immediately compromising the occupants' ability to survive in Earth's atmosphere. Within minutes, 4 more hegemony soldiers had suffered similar fates. Their suits leaked atmosphere while their oxygen supplies became contaminated with what their systems identified as dangerous biological agents. In reality, the forest air was perfectly safe for most species, but the aliens' paranoid environmental protocols meant that any contamination triggered emergency procedures. Medical emergency, the patrol leader called desperately. Multiple casualties requiring immediate evacuation. The evacuation attempt provided exactly the opportunity Colonel Chun had been planning for. As hegemony dropships descended to retrieve their compromised personnel, they entered the most dangerous phase of jungle warfare, the moment when advanced technology became a critical vulnerability rather than an advantage. Lieutenant Nakamura's team had spent 2 days preparing the landing zone with modifications that would be invisible to alien sensors but devastating to their equipment. Biological agents that interfered with electronic systems, carefully positioned obstacles that would force aircraft into specific approach paths, and traditional hunting techniques adapted for use against technological opponents. The first dropship settled toward what appeared to be a clear landing zone. Its pilot focused on the urgent medical situation below. The hegemony military doctrine emphasized rapid casualty evacuation, a principle that worked perfectly in conventional warfare but created predictable patterns that jungle fighters could exploit. As the aircraft descended through the forest canopy, its hull encountered what seemed like random contact with vegetation. In reality, every touch had been carefully planned. Plants that produced specific chemical reactions when disturbed, vines that had been treated with compounds that would adhere to metal surfaces, and traditional traps that used the aircraft's own weight and momentum against it. The dropship's sensors registered multiple system warnings as biological contamination spread across its hull. Environmental seals that had been designed to resist chemical weapons proved vulnerable to organic compounds that had never appeared in hegemony threat assessments. The pilot found his controls becoming increasingly unresponsive as biocorrosive agents penetrated electronic systems. "Base, this is Rescue 1, the pilot reported with growing alarm. "I'm showing multiple system failures. Some kind of biological attack on our hull integrity." Admiral Gorthon listened to the reports from his flagship with mounting disbelief. His forces possessed the most advanced military technology in known space, yet they were being systematically defeated by primitives using what appeared to be organic materials and chemical compounds. The implications challenged everything the hegemony understood about modern warfare. "Deploy the heavy assault battalion," he ordered. "Full mechanized support. If these humans want to play primitive games, we'll show them what real military power looks like." Colonel Chun received notification of the escalation through her intelligence network with satisfaction rather than concern. The aliens were responding exactly as human planners had predicted they would, by escalating to heavier weapons and larger formations, making themselves even more vulnerable to the environmental warfare that was humanity's greatest advantage. "Sir, long-range reconnaissance confirms 3 hegemony mechanized companies moving toward our position," reported Captain Morrison, the regiment's intelligence officer. "Estimated arrival in 8 hours. Chun studied the tactical display that showed force dispositions across the entire operational area. The aliens were committing exactly the resources she had hoped for, deploying expensive, high-maintenance equipment into an environment where every system would be constantly degraded by conditions their designers had never anticipated. "Signal all companies," she ordered. "Implement Protocol 7. It's time to show our visitors what this planet is really like when it decides to fight back." Protocol 7 represented the culmination of decades of research into environmental warfare techniques. Every plant, animal, microorganism, and natural process in the jungle became a potential weapon. Fungi that could dissolve metal components, insects that would interfere with optical systems, weather patterns that could be subtly influenced to create maximum disruption for technology-dependent forces. The Hegemony Heavy Assault Battalion approached the forest with confidence born of overwhelming firepower superiority. Their mechanized units carried enough destructive potential to level entire cities, while their energy shields could deflect anything short of anti-ship weapons. Against primitive humans armed with chemical projectile weapons, the outcome seemed predetermined. What they encountered instead was something that no military training had prepared them for. The forest itself had become their enemy, attacking their equipment with patient, systematic precision that turned the Hegemony mechanized column ground to a halt as the lead vehicle disappeared into what their sensors had identified as solid ground. The camouflage pit trap, reinforced with traditional construction techniques that created no technological signature, had swallowed an entire assault tank along with its crew of 6 elite soldiers. Colonel Vexthal, commanding officer of the Heavy Assault Battalion, stared at the tactical display in disbelief. According to every scan, every analysis, every piece of data his sensors provided, his forces were advancing through empty wilderness against an enemy that possessed no significant military capability. Yet in the past 4 hours he had lost 12 vehicles and 40 soldiers to attacks that his technology couldn't even detect. "Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from throughout the column," reported his communications officer. "Vehicle systems are failing at an accelerated rate. Our mechanics are unable to identify the cause." The cause was something that Hegemony military science had never encountered: biological warfare conducted by experts who understood their environment at a molecular level. Every surface the alien vehicles touched had been treated with carefully cultivated organisms that would systematically break down the materials the aliens used for armor, electronics, and life support systems. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the 75th Regiment's biochemist, monitored the engagement from a laboratory that existed as a series of interconnected tree hollows 60 meters above the forest floor. Her team had spent months developing biological agents specifically designed to exploit the materials science that made Hegemony technology possible. "Colonel Chun, this is Science Team Alpha," she reported through the organic communication network. "Enemy vehicle degradation proceeding at optimal rates. Their metallurgy is even more vulnerable to our compounds than initial testing indicated." Chun smiled as she watched the tactical situation develop exactly as human planners had anticipated. The aliens' overconfidence in their technology had made them predictable, while their complete ignorance of biological warfare had left them defensively helpless against attacks they couldn't even comprehend. "Understood. Science team, signal all units to proceed to Phase 2. Phase 2 represented the transition from defensive operations to active engagement, using tactics that would demonstrate to the Hegemony exactly how wrong their assumptions about human military capability had been. The aliens had dismissed Earth's defenders as primitive, but they were about to encounter warfare sophistication that surpassed anything in their galactic experience. Sergeant First Class Williams emerged from concealment that had kept her invisible to alien sensors for 3 days. Her equipment looked crude compared to Hegemony technology, traditional camouflage, chemical projectile weapons, and communication gear that relied on biological rather than electronic principles. What the aliens couldn't understand was that this apparent primitiveness represented the Ultimate advancement in environmental warfare, her target was the battalion command vehicle, identifiable by its enhanced communication arrays and additional armor plating. The vehicle represented millions of credits worth of advanced technology, protected by energy shields and reactive armor that could deflect most known weapons. Against a traditional military opponent, it would have been nearly invulnerable. Williams carried a weapon that existed nowhere in hegemony tactical databases. The projectile was a guided dart that used biomechanical navigation systems developed by studying how certain birds could track targets through dense forest cover. The warhead contained no explosives, just a carefully engineered biological payload that would systematically shut down every electronic system it encountered. The dart struck the command vehicle's communications array with precision that surprised even Williams herself. Within seconds, the entire vehicle's electronic infrastructure began failing as engineered organisms spread through the circuitry, like a plague designed specifically for technology. "Command, this is Battalion Leader Vexthal," the alien commander shouted into his communications device. "We are under attack by unknown weapons. All systems failing. Request immediate orbital support." Admiral Gorthon received the transmission aboard his flagship with emotions that oscillated between rage and disbelief. His most elite ground forces were being systematically destroyed by primitives who shouldn't have possessed weapons capable of threatening advanced technology. The reports he was receiving challenged fundamental assumptions about how modern warfare operated. "Deploy orbital strike capability," he ordered. "Target the entire forest region? If we cannot locate these humans precisely, we will eliminate their operating environment." The order represented exactly the escalation that human strategic planners had been working to provoke. Orbital bombardment would force the hegemony to reveal capabilities they had been holding in reserve, while accomplishing nothing against an enemy that could survive underground and rebuild more quickly than the aliens could destroy. Colonel Chun received warning of the impending orbital strike through quantum communication, channels that the hegemony still hadn't learned to intercept. The underground bunker complex that served as her command center had been designed to survive exactly this type of attack, while the dispersed nature of her forces meant that even successful strikes would eliminate only a small percentage of human combat capability. "All units, this is command," she transmitted across the secure network. "Implement deep protocol. Orbital bombardment incoming in 30 minutes. Deep protocol represented the ultimate expression of human adaptation to environmental warfare. Every soldier, every piece of equipment, every supply cache would disappear into concealment that made their previous camouflage look obvious by comparison. The forest would appear empty to any form of reconnaissance, while remaining fully functional as a military operating base. The hegemony orbital strike began with energy beams that could vaporize entire city blocks. Trees that had stood for centuries disappeared in flashes of light, while soil was fused into glass by temperatures that exceeded anything found on most inhabited planets. From orbit, the bombardment appeared to be completely successful. A vast area of forest had been reduced to sterile wasteland. What the aliens couldn't detect was that their target had never been on the surface. Human forces had gone deeper than any hegemony scan could penetrate, using natural cave systems and constructed tunnels that formed a three-dimensional battlefield extending hundreds of meters below ground level. "Bombardment complete," reported the flagship's weapons officer. "Target area sterilized. No life signs detected." Admiral Gorthon allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Perhaps these humans had been more resourceful than anticipated, but overwhelming firepower had always been the hegemony's ultimate answer to tactical challenges. "Deploy reconnaissance teams to confirm elimination of hostile forces." The reconnaissance teams that descended into what had been pristine Amazon rainforest found exactly what their instruments told them to expect. A scorched wasteland where nothing could possibly have survived the orbital bombardment. Their sensors detected no life forms, no energy signatures, no indication that the area had ever been occupied by hostile forces. What they missed was the network of concealed observation posts that allowed human forces to monitor every movement the aliens made. Master Sergeant Rodriguez watched the hegemony reconnaissance teams from a position that existed as a carefully camouflaged opening in what appeared to be solid rock. The aliens moved with the confidence of soldiers who believed. Their mission was a simple verification exercise. They expected to find nothing but destruction, and their preconceptions made them vulnerable to an ambush that would demonstrate human tactical capabilities in ways that would shock the entire hegemony military hierarchy. Command. This is Rodriguez, he whispered into his organic communication system. Enemy reconnaissance in optimal position for capture operation? Request permission to proceed. Chun's response came back immediately. Confirmed. Execute capture protocol. Intelligence wants prisoners for interrogation. The capture operation unfolded with surgical precision that showcased everything the aliens had failed to understand about human military capability. Each member of the reconnaissance team was isolated and subdued using techniques that produced no energy signatures, no communication alerts, and no indication that anything had happened. Biomolecular compounds delivered through skin contact rendered the aliens unconscious within seconds. Their environmental suits were carefully breached to ensure dependency on human life support, while their equipment was systematically disabled using methods that left no trace of sabotage. Within minutes, 12 elite hegemony soldiers had become prisoners without their command structure. Realizing anything had gone wrong, the interrogation that followed provided intelligence that would reshape human understanding of the galactic conflict. The captured aliens revealed that Earth represented something unprecedented in hegemony experience, a planet where the environment itself had become militarized, where primitive technology exceeded advanced systems in practical application, and where the defending population possessed capabilities that had never appeared in galactic military doctrine. Your forces, the captured hegemony commander admitted under interrogation, represent warfare concepts that